criminal is going to be armed with a knife.
Prosecutors say Isabella Guzman stabbed her mother 79 times in the family's bathroom last week. She said nothing as she walked right past them.
Have you heard of pretty privilege? I'm sure you have. And I'm even more sure that while we all know that it can have some serious disadvantages, it has a funny way of distracting people from the real issues at hand. And no case demonstrates this better than Isabella Guzman's. But I might be getting a little ahead of myself here. We've heard of cases where victims are murdered by those who are near and dear to them. Matricide and patricide are as old as time after all. But sometimes, it's the aftermath of the cases that can be equally shocking. And no case demonstrates this better than Isabella Guzman's, who stabbed her mother over 100 times and then went viral on TikTok for all the wrong reasons. Well, without further ado, let's get right into it. Isabella Guzman was a young woman from Colorado and was living with her mother, Yunmi Hoy, and stepfather Ryan Hoy until the day of the crime. She had always been a troubled kid and never got along with her mother, who she fought with almost every day. Her parents had separated from each other when she was 7 years old because her mom cheated on her dad, and she was initially sent to live with her mother. But when Yoon Hoy remarried, Isabella reportedly went back to her biological father for a short while, with whom she apparently didn't have a terrible relationship. For reasons unknown to the public, however, she went back to live with her mother and her stepfather soon after. Yoonmi apparently worked over 12 hours a day for her daughter, at a salon that might have even been named after her. Growing up, Isabella was always a rebellious child. She never had a good relationship with either of her parents and hated school. Although she managed to get average grades, she would usually skip class and hang out with other troubled kids. Reportedly, she would often party hard, drink, smoke, and do drugs with her friends, traits that infuriated her mother. Years after the case, when Isabella finally spoke up, she also mentioned that her parents were practicing Jehovah's and that her relationship with her parents was further strained after she quit the religion at the age of 14. She apparently faced abuse at home, and some fights with her mother even left her with scars on her hands. Additionally, her parents had noticed that she exhibited some mental health problems, but decided to leave them unchecked, which turned out to be a fatal mistake. She studied in Overland High School, and as I mentioned earlier, she hated studying. Just a few weeks before she was supposed to graduate, Isabella dropped out and decided to live with her boyfriend instead. This was a breaking point in her relationship, and their fights went from fairly frequent to almost every single minute. Her parents were reportedly getting scared of her increasingly threatening behavior, and even called the cops on her once, who promptly told her that since she was 18, she would be treated as an adult and that her mother would kick her out if her bad behavior continued. On the day before the murder, Isabella got into a huge argument with her mother. Some reports say that it was because her mother had found out that Isabella was sneaking her boyfriend into the house when she was out for work, and this led to a huge blowout between the two. The two didn't make up, and Isabella proceeded to send a threatening email to her mother on the afternoon before the murder, which read, "You will pay." According to her stepfather Ryan, Isabella was yelling very loudly at her mother and even spat in her face during the argument. Her mother was so frightened after the fight that she called the cops the same day, who let her off with a warning and threatened to get her arrested if she didn't fix her attitude immediately. According to everyone who spoke to her that day, from her biological father and her stepfather to the police, Isabella had seemed calm and looked like she was ready to make amends with her mother after she returned from work. Little did everyone know that she would take a drastic step that would end one life and drastically alter everyone else's. On the night of August 28, 2013, after Yoonmi Hoy returned from a long day at work, she went to take a shower. Her husband Ryan was sitting downstairs and was watching TV when he heard his wife scream out his name loudly. He rushed upstairs and opened the bathroom door, only to find his stepdaughter staring at him for a second before she slammed the door in his face and locked it in front of him. His efforts to open the door were futile, and soon enough, he saw blood pooling from under the bathroom door. He rushed downstairs to call the police and went back upstairs just in time to hear his wife's final words, "Jehovah." After what seemed like an eternity and a single second at the same time, Isabella opened the door, holding a knife and covered in blood from head to toe. She didn't look at Ryan or even acknowledge him and walked right past him and straight out of the house. When Ryan went inside the bathroom to check on his wife, he found her lying in a pool of her own blood, with her throat slashed and a bloody baseball bat next to her. By the time the authorities arrived at the Hoy house, Yunmi was already dead. She had been beaten severely and stabbed over 100 times in her face and her neck. They immediately launched a massive search for Isabella, and the news about this teenager spread like wildfire, who they found at a parking lot close by the very next day, in the exact same bloody clothes. They arrested her immediately, even though she still tried to convince them that they had the wrong person. After all of the messed up events leading up to the murder, you'd think that this case couldn't get any worse. And that's where you're wrong. This is by far the most controversial part of the Isabella Guzman case, and the reason she went viral on TikTok in the first place, which we'll get to in just a bit. She went on trial and pleaded not guilty on the grounds of insanity. When doctors examined her, they found out that she had been suffering from severe anxious and paranoid schizophrenia for several years. Isabella had been suffering from serious auditory and visual hallucinations for a long time, and she believed that she killed a woman named Cecilia to save the world. Her behavior at court was also rather strange. She made odd faces at cameras panning towards her, but seemed to switch between personas in a split second. She would laugh, tense up, seem amused, look bewildered, or stay utterly calm within the span of a few minutes, which was understandably rather confusing. A lot of what happened during her trial is largely unknown, but from what we could find out, her behavior shocked everyone. The court finally accepted that she was genuinely mentally unstable and sentenced her to rehabilitation in a mental hospital, which could take anywhere from a few years to the rest of her life. Remember when I mentioned that she made funny faces at the cameras during her trial? Well, TikTok stumbled upon those a few years later, and they instantly went viral. In typical TikTok fashion, clips of her were paired up with the popular track Sweet But Psycho by Ava Max and were shared everywhere. I mean, it's not like attractive murderers have never had fan bases before. Like, do you remember Jeffrey Dahmer? That man had a massive fan club, even though he was a psychopathic serial killer. But TikTok has the tendency of taking things to another level. Isabella very quickly turned into a popular trend on TikTok, and people would duet with her constantly, with that song in the background, of course. People became enamored with her, and very soon, she gathered up a sizable fan following for herself. TikTok tried its best to remove her videos, stating that it was against their policies. But we all know that nothing ever really dies on the internet. There were already hundreds of screen recordings of Isabella, and they only got circulated with more vigor after TikTok tried pulling them down. Some users even made new accounts entirely dedicated to her videos. Really makes you think, doesn't it? Who's worse in this situation? The killer or the killer's fans? Even though the trend died out eventually, it wasn't because the community magically developed a conscience. It definitely wasn't because they saw how messed up it is to glorify a mentally ill murderer who killed her own mother. It was simply because they lost interest. The internet really is a gift and curse, isn't it? 7 years after the crime, in 2020, Isabella made her first public statement.
But mama, I'm in love with a criminal. And this type.
She claimed to have been rehabilitated and that she was ready to rejoin society. She said that her medications had helped and that she was a different person in 2013, and that if she had gotten the help she needed, she would have never killed her mother. Isabella also opened up about the abuse she had faced when she was younger and about some details that strained her relationship with her mother, which we mentioned earlier in the video. Apparently, while she was in the mental institution, she was sexually assaulted by an employee and was trying to sue him. But her biggest desire was to simply leave and begin living a normal life. Isabella's case is a classic example of why you shouldn't sensationalize murderers and how people don't care about that and will do it anyway if the killers are attractive enough. It's a sad reflection of society, and I wish we were better than that. But cases like that remind me that might just be wishful thinking. Do you think that this case could have gone differently if she received help early on? Or do you think that Isabella was just a cold-blooded killer at the end of the day? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. Don't forget to click on the bell icon to never miss an update about more dark cases. Well then, see you later.